Sometimes we've done these episodes and we've had a specific theme, like, okay, we're talking about running backs this episode, or we're talking about quarterbacks, or we're just doing a mock draft. Today, we're doing a lot of different things. We're talking about some pro comps for some of these quarterbacks, some early comps that I'll kind of work through, some guys that, okay, when I see this guy, I sort of think of this player. We'll talk about some best and worst landing spots, not just for the top quarterbacks, but also for the top players in this 2026 NFL draft. We'll talk about some team needs and plenty of stuff. We're going to cover a ton of stuff over the next 30 minutes, so let's get straight to it. We're going to start with these pro comps that we have for some of these quarterbacks. So we're going to throw some PFF numbers at you as well as, of course, my home base, Pro Football Focus. If you guys want to see all these numbers for yourself, of course, that you can with a PFF Plus subscription. Let's take a look at Fernando Mendoza, though. He is the crown jewel of this class. He is most likely going to go number one overall. The Heisman Trophy winner. He's playing for the national championship, an undefeated season from Indiana, and he is a major reason why. Let's talk about a pro comp here for him. And the early pro comp that I like for him in structure, man, what we've seen recently from Sam Darnold. I feel like both of them are built decently similarly. They've got a little bit of plus athleticism. I wouldn't say that they're dual threat quarterbacks, but they are guys who can give you a little bit with their legs as well. And man, when they see it, obviously they've been coached by some fantastic coaches, both of these guys. Kevin O'Connell for Sam Darnold last year, Clint Kubiak and what he's been able to do in that offense this year with Seattle, and then, of course, Kurt Cignetti being Indiana's coach and what Fernando Mendoza has been able to do, taking a leap from what he was at Cal versus what he is now at Indiana. I feel like when these guys see it, man, I think that it looks absolutely fantastic. And so let's go to a play that sort of reminds me of like, okay, this is how I see a little bit of Sam Darnold, because I think he's got the adequate arm strength. And man, when he sees it, I feel like it looks so well. Let's go to a play for Fernando Mendoza. This is the play in the college football playoff game. This is the one that I want to hit first. College football playoff game. And actually, okay, we're showing some of his highlights here. I think that what he does really well, he's got a pretty snappy release. He's pretty quick to recognize when he knows guys are going to be open. The pre-snap analysis is really good from him, especially this past year. You don't have the passing success that he has without really being able to recognize things pretty quickly. And so you see that snappy release. There's the mobility that I was talking about, right? He's got a little bit of scoot to him. Again, he's not a dual threat quarterback, but I think he's got a little bit with his legs where he can make things happen. But it's that ball placement. It's that quick release. It's getting the ball exactly where it needs to go. That to me is something that I love so much about Fernando Mendoza. So again, let's try to pull up this play here. We're working with the Microsoft Surface, and this is what I really like, is being able to get these plays and be able to draw and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about here. So this is what I'm talking about with some pre-snap analysis, being so prepared. And again, when we have seen Sam Darnold over the last couple of years, I don't know if this is going to be my final comp for him. I don't know if it's a perfect comp, but when I've watched how confidently Sam Darnold plays, when he recognizes things, especially in the pre-snap, man, it looks pretty. And this is an example. So this is from Indiana. This is the college football playoff game that we have here. So we've got, this is the setup in the scenario. We're going to be running essentially a slant route, a quick slant route, and then this receiver is going to be running a little front pylon corner. It's not a back pylon corner, but sort of like a front pylon corner, a little bit more of just like, if you want to call it a quicker out route, you can. But essentially what we're doing is Fernando Mendoza is going to snap the football, and he's going to be taking a look at this corner specifically, because even though it looks like it's man coverage, there's plenty of coverages that, okay, they look like they're man pre-snap and then they're rotating, they're more zone post-snap. So he is basically just looking at this cornerback. And the idea here is that if this cornerback drops, if he opens up his hips and he drops a little bit further to cover what would be this out route here, then all of a sudden the slant route is going to be open, because there's a good chance that this safety is not going to be able to close in on this route right here, because Fernando knows that he's going to have to respect this route, or at least this receiver getting vertical right off the bat. So he reads this corner. It ends up being man coverage. And the second that he recognizes, almost, you know what, I'm going to play this at slower speed. Let's get this at half speed here, because watch what happens. The second that he sees this outside corner flip his hips and run with this wide receiver, boom, he is loading up to give this wide receiver a perfect pass right at the front pylon. So let's play a little bit slower. Okay, he's looking that direction. Boom. This is exact. You see the corner opens up, his hips, and you can see that he's going to run and follow this wide receiver. It is true man coverage. You can already notice that Fernando Mendoza, within half a second, is already starting his windup here. Ball gets out. This safety has no chance to defend this wide receiver with that much space between where the defender is and the front pylon is. A perfectly thrown pass. And there's a couple more angles of this that you'll just see. Again, look at that combination of the route. You're putting these defensive players in conflict, and wherever the coverage dictates that conflict is the worst, that's where the ball is going. And that's what Fernando Mendoza was able to do there. He was able to see that very, very quickly. You see a little bit of a high snap that he corrals, and boom, the second that this player opens up his hips and you know that they are not dropping into this area, they are instead following this wide receiver, that's when Fernando Mendoza loads up to throw the ball to the front pylon at a place where, look at that beautiful ball placement as well. Defensive back had no chance. So that's a little bit of that Sam Darnold where when he sees it pre-snap and when it manifests the way that he wants it to, man, it looks pretty. He's got a lot of the tools to make things click. Obviously, he was drafted very highly to the New York Jets because of it. Now, Fernando Mendoza is a little bit better under pressure than Sam Darnold certainly has been throughout his career, but I think as of late is more what we're talking about here, that sort of player. So I'm looking at some people in the chat. Fernando Mendoza equals Baker Mayfield. I don't know if he's just got that raw dog in him. You know what I'm saying? So, but look, I can understand the playmaking mentality of Baker Mayfield there, but I do think he's a little bit different of a style. I think he's a little bit more of a pocket presence where Baker likes to roll things out. And not that Baker can't win from the pocket. I just think he's a little bit different, but I can see from the arm talent the success. Mendoza equals Kirk Cousins. See, I think he's a little bit more mobile than Kirk Cousins. Now it's all right. Well, I don't think he's as mobile as Baker, but I think he's a little bit more mobile than Kirk Cousins. Fernando's got some Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow in him. Man, that is very high praise. That's obviously, if you believe that he is that caliber of a quarterback, then no question you're taking him number one overall. Somebody said it looks like Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert's got a little bit more juice in the arm. Herbert has, I think, one of the top 5 arms in the NFL when it comes to overall arm strength. I don't quite think that for Mendoza, but man, he is good throwing deep, an elite PFF passing grade when throwing it deep down the field. Mendoza ain't a statue like Matt Ryan or Kirk Cousins. I agree with you there. I thought about Matt Ryan. I did think about Matt Ryan as a comp, but I think he's got a little bit more athleticism to him. That's why I kind of landed on what we've seen recently from Sam Darnold. So I like that from the chat as we're kind of going through these other guys. Let me continue to hear it from y'all. The next player that we're talking about, Ty Simpson. The next quarterback I can't talk about Dante Moore anymore. He's going back to Oregon. So let's talk about Ty Simpson here. The pro comp that I have for Ty Simpson right now was J.J. McCarthy. And I know some massive red flags already. People probably up in arms. Oh my goodness, he thinks he's terrible. That's not true. I didn't think that J.J. McCarthy was terrible when he was coming into the NFL. But I think that what Ty Simpson is in his current state is something that you need to take honestly. I like Ty Simpson a lot. I think he's got adequate arm strength. I think he's got good mobility to him, not afraid to throw over the middle of the field, good third and long type of a quarterback. He can pass it 15, 20 yards down the field on any down. All of that is possible. All of that was also in J.J. McCarthy's scouting report. The problem with McCarthy is when he gets pressured. And unfortunately, that's an issue with Ty Simpson as well. His passing grade drops all the way from an 81.4 down to a 45.7 when he is under pressure. And that's why I think McCarthy, obviously leaving school as an underclassman, it was one of those instances where maybe you would have liked for him to stay a little bit longer in college. And maybe if he stays a little bit longer in college, then it's a situation where he's not as bad under pressure as what we've seen this past season. And so that's what really worries me about Ty Simpson, and a quarterback that I really like. I think is very talented, but I just get a little bit worried about how he plays under pressure. And I do want to show a good play from him, though, for the play that I want to analyze. I want to talk about a game that he played against Oklahoma in the college football playoff. And there's an instance to show that this guy, he does have what it takes to play at the NFL level. Now, you might watch this play, and if you don't really put it under a microscope, maybe you're not appreciating it quite as much. But we are going to put it under a microscope here. So let's take a look at this. They're playing Oklahoma in the college football playoff. I know we can't see the whole picture here. I wish we had a little bit wider of an angle, but it's okay. We'll still be able to work with this. Essentially, what Ty Simpson has in this scenario is it is a progressive sail concept. And a sail concept, which is a levels concept, some people call it. Essentially, you're trying to put zone coverage into conflict here, where you know that there's going to be zone coverage on this side of the field. So what you're doing is you're hoping that the other team doesn't have enough zone defenders to cover all of the routes that will be going into that zone. So a sail concept is you're going to have one shallow route right here. You're going to have, I believe it is this player. I think that's Jeremy Bernard. He is going to be coming through the intermediate part right here. And then I believe it is this tight end here is actually going to have a deeper route going. It's not quite there. It's a little bit further. But you guys understand what I'm saying, where it's first level, second level, and then third level. These are the areas where you can attack this zone. So you're hoping that the team does not have three defenders to be able to really be able to cover that zone the way that they need to with three routes going in there. Essentially, what it boils down to is you're often going to be looking at this player. Does he stay with the shallow route here, or does he sink and does he take, whoever could be occupying this part of the zone? Because if he stays here, you're going to throw it over his head because you're hoping that this safety here is not going to have the ability to come down. And the reason why is because you got somebody distracting him there. So I'm trying not to have too much scribble so you guys can understand this. So essentially, again, if this guy stays here, you're throwing it over his head to this route. And if he comes up, and if he drops back a little bit further, then you're just taking the easy completion right there. There's a fourth option here, but not all quarterbacks get to that fourth option. You'll hear people say this. This quarterback has the ability to get to the backside dig. What does that mean? I'm going to show you exactly what that means. Because Oklahoma, I believe it is this linebacker right here, is actually going to also drop. So now you have your worst fear. You have a defender who can easily take the shallow route. You have another one who could take the intermediate route. And then you have this safety here who is going to be able to cover the third deep route. That then requires you to get to this route here, which will be a backside dig route. And if you have so much going on this side of this side of the field, so many defenders will be flowing to that side that often this backside dig comes open right here. But a lot of quarterbacks panic and they leave the pocket and they don't get to that backside dig. But Ty Simpson, you see, okay, look, all right, he's reading these defenders right here. He's reading the shallow defender. He goes, okay, that guy's there. Okay, this linebacker actually dropped right here. You can literally see it in his eyes. He's looking here first. He'll look here a second. And while he's looking in this direction, he's also looking at the deep route. And then you will see him totally pivot his body to get to that backside dig. Boom, there it is. He gets back to the middle of the field. There's the route open right over the middle. So that sort of tells me that he understands high-level quarterbacking. And the reason why I liked Ty Simpson a lot at the early parts of the season is because we saw a ton of that. But as the season went on, he started to crumble a lot under pressure, and that was a big issue. Somebody in the chat saying Ryan Mallett. I think Ryan Mallett had a stronger arm and tried to rely on that arm a lot more coming out of Arkansas. I don't think Ty Simpson has that quite of arm talent, but I also think that Ty Simpson anticipates a little bit better than Ryan Mallett did. Silent Griffin in the chat, as a Jets fan, I'm excited for them to ruin this kid and then see him become an all-star somewhere else. No, that's if you got the Sam Darnold comp, which actually now I'm talking about playing well in structure and not great out of structure. Maybe Sam Darnold works for him. Mac Jones is another suggestion from people in the chat. Is he Mac Jones? I could see the Mac Jones comparisons. I actually, that one's not too far off. I could see that. And then we got a couple of other shout outs for some guys who are on the screen. Okay, let's get to those guys. Carson Beck, because somebody in the chat saying Carson Beck equals Colt McCoy. Well, the comp that I had for Carson Beck was Kyle Trask. And I think that Kyle Trask is a quarterback who has been predominantly a backup in the NFL. And I kind of think that's mainly what Carson Beck is going to be. I'm not so sure he's going to be a full-time starting quarterback. I think there's maybe a world where certainly what we've seen with him being getting to the national championship with Miami, is somebody going to give him a shot? I think so. But I think mostly he's going to be more of a backup quarterback in the NFL, because the fact of the matter is, you look at some of his PFF numbers, Beck the big time throw rate is just 3.1%. And you see these other guys, it's above six. It's 6, it's 7%. His is all the way down to a 3. His turnover worthy play rate was lower. It's 1.9%, which is good. It's what you want. That's ideal. But if you're not cranking it up enough to really attack deep down the field, you're kind of just a game manager quarterback. And again, you start to be replaceable for these teams that might search for a higher ceiling. So I have Kyle Trask on Carson Beck, who I think has done a lot of good things to rebuild his stock, because I really do think that he was probably just an afterthought day 3 quarterback. And now I think, all right, well, maybe he could sneak into the 3rd round, although I think the early day 3 is probably still right there for Carson Beck. For Trinidad Chambliss, he's the next guy that we're getting to. Russell Wilson is the early working comp that I have for Trinidad Chambliss, because he's a smaller prospect, first and foremost. So when you think of comps, you got to think of body comps as well. And with Russell Wilson being a smaller quarterback, Trinidad Chambliss being a smaller quarterback, don't think of what Russell Wilson has been over the last 3 years, okay? Think about what Russell Wilson was for the Seahawks. That's what I want you guys to envision here. He was a little bit mobile, an escape artist, always looking deep down the field. That's where the moon ball label came from. Somebody in the chat saying Trinidad Chambliss QB2 in this class. I mean, he could be. I actually think that there is a chance where he could be. So let's take a look at a play here from Trinidad Chambliss that I want to pull up, that I want you guys to see. So this is in the game versus Georgia in the college football playoff. And this is the second time that he has seen this Georgia defense. And so he's familiar with it as anybody can be maybe familiar with a Kirby Smart defense. But you'll notice on this play, it's sort of a broken play. It's a vertical stretching play. He rolls out to the right. Watch just the natural ability he has to throw on the run, and it's a beauty of a deep pass. There's not a ton to analyze here schematically outside of just this is a talented quarterback who's making a damn good play outside of the pocket and deep down the field. There's that interior pressure, flushed him out to his right, rolling right, beautiful pass right over the cornerback, and before the safety can get over there. That's natural ability, folks. I mean, that is touch, that is accuracy, that is just playmaking at its finest. And I think that when you talk to people, and the reason why they like Trinidad Chambliss, these are the reasons, because of who he is outside of structure. He had an 83.7 PFF passing grade overall this season, but a 6.3 passing grade when there was pressure. Out of structure, I think that he also had a handful of those big-time throws. The big-time throw rate was over 6%. It was at 6.1%. So I think that I think a lot of people are suckers for, and I don't say that negatively, I understand it, those outside of the pocket type of plays. And Trinidad Chambliss gives that to you better than any quarterback in this class, I think. The last guy that I just want to shout out is Drew Aller, because he was somebody who a lot of people thought could be a first-round pick. He obviously doesn't have a great start to this season. He gets hurt. He is somebody who I think he's got all the arm talent in the world, but just inaccuracies, not great decisions from Drew Aller throughout his college football career, including this year. I think last year was a little bit better, but it's basically the outlier for the rest of his career. I went with Carson Wentz, and I'm not talking about the MVP year for Carson Wentz with the Philadelphia Eagles, more of what he has been for the majority of his career, and that is somebody who got a little bit of mobility to him, bigger body, bigger arm, but just somebody who had too many turnover-worthy plays, not accurate enough. And I think for Drew Aller, now he's not going to have a chance to start right away, and I think that that's a good thing for him. He's got to become more consistent as a passer, because all the tools you could want from the quarterback position when it comes to throwing from the pocket, just not a lot of consistency there for him. Somebody in the chat saying, for Beck, I see Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think Fitzpatrick, maybe from an overall arm talent perspective, they could be the same, but I feel like Ryan Fitzpatrick was like shotgunning a C4 before games. You know, like there's times where he'd put the ball in harm's way, but he'd throw the passes that you need to win games. I'm not so sure that Carson Beck has that mentality. Beck is Will Levis. I don't quite think that he is as athletic as Will Levis, because you got to remember, like, Will Levis, cannon of an arm, really good athlete as well. And I just don't think that Beck is as physically gifted. I think he's a little bit more methodical. Somebody in the chat saying Trinidad Chambliss, Geno Smith. I think Trinidad's got a little bit more scoot than Geno Smith does. I think Geno Smith's a little bit more of a pocket passer, and Trinidad Chambliss a little bit more outside of the pocket. But both of those guys, big game hunters. Somebody said Drew Aller, Joe Milton. I can see getting to that point. So I don't think I fully agree with the comp there, but I can understand, the big armed quarterback, a little bit out of control with that big arm, not as consistent as it needs to be. So I can see that part of it for Joe Milton. Let's talk about some landing spots for these guys. Best and worst case scenario, a couple of them, but we'll rope in a couple of the top players as well. Best landing spots, we're going to go Fernando Mendoza, Ruben Bain Jr., Ty Simpson, Carnell Tate, and Caleb Downs. That's what's on the menu here today. Best landing spot for Fernando Mendoza? We'll go number one overall, of course. You know, it's him going number one overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm not going to take that away from Raiders fans. I'm not going to say some other team's a better landing spot. He's going to go number one overall, and I'll give the Raiders fans their excitement there. Ruben Bain Jr., a lot of different spots where Ruben Bain Jr. could fit, although he's a unique player, right? I mean, he's got short arms, he's got the natural leverage to him, but he's not really built lengthwise like a typical edge rusher. So it would take a certain defense for him to really be able to be at his best. I think the Kansas City Chiefs with Steve Spagnuolo could make a lot of sense, but when I think about it, him being a top 5 pick, Tennessee Titans, man, set up that defensive line with Tavondre Sweat, Jeffrey Simmons, and Ruben Bain Jr. You get a defensive coordinator that's willing to rotate those guys all around the line of scrimmage. That is some beef in between the tackles, and that's what we love to see. So I love that landing spot there. For Ty Simpson, my favorite landing spot is the Los Angeles Rams. And the reason why is sort of what we talked about with JJ McCarthy. Is like JJ McCarthy was kind of thrust into that starting role before he was ready. And Ty Simpson, if he goes to the Rams, as well as Matthew Stafford's playing right now, he'd come back another year and you could sit behind Matthew Stafford with Sean McVay as your quarterback. That's an ideal landing spot. I'd love for Ty Simpson to get to sit a little bit. I wish that he would have went back to school. I guess I get it given the current landscape of college football, but I would love to see him on the Rams because it would allow him to sit behind one of the best with one of the best coaches. And I think that you could really get a good quarterback out of him as long as you are patient with his timeline. So that's an area where you could see that happening. Carnell Tatum go with the Cleveland Browns as the best landing spot here for him. Comes wide receiver 1, familiar area, as we say on the NFL Stock Exchange show, low moving cost, baby. You barely even need to hire movers. Just throw it all in the U-Haul. You're already up in Columbus, Ohio. Just drive straight up the road, right to Cleveland. Easy. Saving money financially, and he becomes your wide receiver 1. I think he's immediately wide receiver 1 for that group. I think Jerry Jeudy gets to then become a little bit more of the underneath wide receiver, where I think he's a little bit more comfortable. Then he gets some of the deep shots with him a little bit later. He doesn't have to run the full route tree, be that high target type of a player. I just don't think he's been worth that for them. So Carnell Tate absolutely can be. And then Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. I'm going to say the Washington Commanders, and the reason why is because they're one of the older teams in the NFL. They have one of the highest average ages of anybody. They need players on basically every part of their defense. They need pass rushers at the edge spots. They need new, younger linebackers. They need safeties as well. And so by getting a player like Caleb Downs, for as versatile as he is, this is a multi-year rebuild and an addition type of plan for the Washington Commanders. And so whatever you need him to play in the short term and then also the long term, Caleb Downs can do it for you. So I think that Washington's an ideal landing spot there. Somebody in the chat is saying Bain possibly to the Saints. He has definitely been their type, although I will say Dennis Allen no longer there as the defensive coordinator. So that defense that they're running is a little bit different. It's not as predicated on size at those edge rusher positions. But for what New Orleans, maybe Mickey Loomis, their general manager, still loves that. So that could be a fit there just because that is what they have done a lot over the years with drafting. I just wonder if it's going to be a little bit different now with Dennis Allen no longer there, with him being the DC in Chicago. Now let's talk about some worst landing spots here. I need the Fernando Mendoza, talented quarterback that could basically help everybody. But I think that Cleveland's probably the worst landing spot for him because I get so worried about that offensive line. I think the offensive line is multiple years away because they've got veterans who aren't playing as well as they used to. They've got guys on expiring contracts. There is a world where 2 years from now, there's not a single starter that they have that is currently on the team right now. And that worries me with the young franchise quarterback is the offensive line situation. Then, of course, if you're drafting Fernando Mendoza, if you've happened to get him in the first round, you're not getting a stud wide receiver either. So you have to worry about that too. So I think Cleveland, if that were to happen somehow, would not be a great landing spot for Mendoza. The Bengals are who I'm going to go with for Ruben Bain. And the reason why is because given the fact that they have Myles Murphy and they have, in theory, as of right now, Trey Hendrickson still, and they just drafted Shamar Stewart, they'd be playing Bain as truly just an interior defensive lineman. And I know there's some people out there that think that that's his best spot. I think he's so much more useful if you give yourself the flexibility to move him at different positions. But if you were to get drafted by Cincinnati, I think that they would want him to just be an interior defensive lineman. And I think that that would be wasting the overall talent skill set that Ruben Bain has. And so I wouldn't love that spot for him. Ty Simpson, the worst landing spot for him, I think, is the Arizona Cardinals, similar to the reason why I talked about Fernando Mendoza not being a good fit for Cleveland. I'm worried about the offensive line long term with the Arizona Cardinals because, if they're getting Ty Simpson in the second round, okay, well, then hopefully you drafted an offensive lineman in the first round. Hopefully you signed some offensive linemen in free agency. So maybe I change my tune on this a little bit depending on how he is acquired on the team. But as of right now, there's some unknowns in the running game with all the injuries that they had last year. I love the receiving group, right? Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, Trey McBride. That's fantastic. But the offensive line is... Paris Johnson Jr. was basically the only one where you go, yep, feel really good about him going into 2026. Isaiah Adams a little bit, but y'all, the forward hold I know has been there for a couple of years, but they need a lot better on that offensive line. For a player that struggled under pressure, if he goes to Arizona and he's expected to start for them very quickly, I get worried depending on what the offensive line looks like for them and how many changes they can make. For Carnell Tate, the worst landing spot to me is the Miami Dolphins. They're probably going to be looking for another wide receiver next to Jalen Waddle because I think that they're going to cut Tyreek Hill because they're able to save a bunch of money. They're going to move on from him. They're going to move on from Tua Tagovailoa. What's the quarterback situation look like? What's the offensive play caller situation look like? And then what do we do with the offensive line? Because I think the offensive line was just not what it needed to be. Aaron Brewer had a great year, but the guard spots, man, really unreliable on that team. And so with Carnell Tate, I just go, is Quinn Ewers your quarterback? Because Quinn Ewers is very up and down. There's unknown at the quarterback spot. There's unknown with the offensive play caller. So I think that would be a tougher landing spot. But to be honest with you, Carnell Tate is so talented of a wide receiver. I think long term it could be fine. But when I was thinking of short term spots, I think maybe that would be a tougher one for him realistically. And honestly, for Caleb Downs, don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for you. I think he's the best player in the class. I think he's as versatile as they come. He can play in the slot for you. He can play free safety. He can play strong safety. He can do everything. He can play at the linebacker level, and he can do everything for you. I think that every defensive coordinator would be thrilled to have this player. And I thought about this one long and hard, and I don't have an answer of where the bad landing spot is for Caleb Downs. I think he'd be excellent for any team. There we go. Those are some best and worst landing spots for 5 players that we have getting drafted, we assume, pretty early in the 2026 NFL draft. Here's another topic that we wanted to talk about today. Which teams could dominate the draft? So, we come away from the 2026 NFL draft and these teams are the topic of conversation. The first one is very obvious. It's the New York Jets. They have 2 first-round picks, they have 2 second-round picks, and they have 3 third-round picks next year. Everybody's going to be talking about the Jets, especially because there's not really a quarterback option now for them at number 2 with Dante Moore going back to school. So what do they do at number 2? Do they trade down and get even more picks? What does the long-term plan look like now for building this team? How slow do they want to play it? All of that. So I think the Jets, absolutely very natural team to dominate the conversations and dominate the 2026 NFL draft. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are an interesting one, guys. They have the first-round pick, and of course the quarterback conversation is going to be there for them. Doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers is going to come back now that they are making a change at head coach. So you got a quarterback that you've either got to sign in free agency or you've got to be able to draft there at the back end of the first round. Trinidad Chambliss could be on the board. We could see Ty Simpson potentially go to that spot, right? Where they could draft a quarterback in the first round, but then they have a second-round pick. They have 3 third-round picks, and then they have 2 fourth-round picks as well. So we talk all the time about, all right, yeah, you got to nail the first-round pick, but the middle, the heart of the draft, 3 third-round picks and 2 fourth-round picks, this is a team that's going to acquire a lot of young players that are very exciting that I think that they need, some offensive playmakers that I think that they're going to be happy with to complement what they already have there. Obviously, a lot of change in the coaching staff, so we'll see what the direction of the team is, but I think that they could absolutely be a team that could dominate. And then finally, the Rams. 2 first-round picks, a second-round pick, a third-round pick, and a fourth-round pick. I think that they're going to be a team that is poised to potentially dominate the draft because that 13th overall pick, the Falcons pick, total luxury for them, right? So do they say to themselves, hey, we want to take a quarterback here. Like, let's take Trinidad Chambliss, let's take Ty Simpson, like let's make sure that we get our quarterback of the future and let's invest in him early. That we've got our not a get out of jail free card, but just a bonus. This bonus pick that we have here, let's make the most of it and pick a quarterback. Or do they say, yeah, shoot, we can pick anybody right here? Do they just go true best player available? Do they just go best player available then throughout the whole draft because they feel like they have that flexibility? I think that a team that with Super Bowl aspirations having a pick that high could absolutely have the chance to really dominate and continue to open that winning window. We asked our Microsoft Surface, our Microsoft Copilot, the question, hey, when's the last time, because the Jets have this, when's the last time that a team had 4 picks in the top 50? And the last time is, well, the New York Jets. The New York Jets had it 4 years ago now in the 2022 NFL draft. The Miami Dolphins had it in 2020 as well. And then you go back to 2019 and 2018. There were a couple of teams that had those 4 selections in the top 50. So, man, you got 4 picks in the top 50. You feel pretty powerful heading into the draft that you could basically do whatever you want. So the New York Jets have it this time around, and funny enough, they were the last team to actually have it 4 years ago. Okay, let's look at some early draft needs. We're going to be doing this to sort of wrap up the show. I think over the course of the next month or so, just looking at some team needs for every team. We're starting with the AFC North. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers. We just talked about them as being a team that could potentially dominate the draft. And somebody in the chat, I said, the Raiders need to dominate the draft in free agency. They absolutely do. I think they've got some free agency money to be able to work with. And obviously having a quarterback that you believe in at number 1 overall, you feel pretty good about that when it comes to a potentially dominate strategy. But Steelers, quarterback, Aaron Rodgers no longer there. Well, we assume that he's going to no longer be there. You got to answer that question. Wide receiver, it was just so blatantly obvious they didn't have a wide receiver that could complement DK Metcalf, that they could lean on in the passing game. They led the NFL in total targets to running backs out of the backfield this past year, I think because they just didn't trust their wide receivers at all. So you need that. And then maybe corner for this team. Depends. I know they were up and down. They've got some guys. They've got Jalen Ramsey. They got Joey Porter Jr. They got Pierre. So they have some players in the secondary, but do you think that you need to upgrade the consistency there? I think that corners may be something that you think about. For the Ravens, offensive guard. I think the offensive guards have been a major issue for them this entire year. It's why they really weren't able to run between the trenches and run a lot of those power man and gap scheme blocking concepts, those duo concepts. They just didn't have a lot of faith in their guards to be able to move people off the ball, and certainly pass protection as well. So I think interior offensive line guard spot makes a lot of sense. We know Tyler Linderbaum is going to be there for a long time. Wide receiver, again, a story of, okay, you had Zay Flowers, and I think that they've been able to get away with it because they've had Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, but I think Mark Andrews took a little bit of a step back this year. So they need a premier wide receiver once again, and then an edge rusher. I think that edge rusher, I know they just drafted Mike Green, but they did not have the production from the edges that they needed to on defense. They didn't generate the pressure on the quarterbacks the way that we're used to seeing a Baltimore Ravens team be able to do. We don't know who their coach is going to be. We don't know exactly what their defensive setup and their scheme is going to be, but they've got to be better on the edges, no doubt about it. The Browns, I think quarterback's a need for them. Now if you tell yourself, hey, I believe in Shedeur Sanders, I think that he could be the starting quarterback next year, okay. But I think there are going to be plenty of people that don't agree with that. Now, I wonder if they just go into next year because the report is out that, hey, Deshaun Watson's healthy. He's going to be competing for this starting job for the Browns. I wonder if they just say, hey, we're going to go into next year, Deshaun Watson, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, whoever our best quarterback is, we'll let them be our best quarterback, and we'll draft a quarterback the following year. To me, that's a tough sell on a fan base that you've already made wait so long for competent quarterback play. That's why I think the quarterback's in need. Offensive line, I mentioned the aging offensive line that they have. 2 years from now, they could have 5 completely different starting offensive linemen. And then wide receiver. That's why we talked about the Browns being a good spot for Carnell Tate. I can see the same with Jordan Tyson from Arizona State as well. Mekhi Lemon from USC would make a lot of sense for this team. They just have to get better playmakers at the wide receiver spot. It just was not good. Their wide receiver 1 spot was just straight up not good enough this year. And it's a little bit of the same situation that the Carolina Panthers were in last year, where they go, hey, we've got wide receiver, we got names. We got Xavier Legette, we've got Jalen Coker, we had Adam Thielen at one point, but we don't have that wide receiver 1. And it's the same situation with Cleveland and their passing attack. They need a wide receiver one, so wide receiver is definitely there for them. Bengals, defensive tackle. The Bengals gave up the most rushing yards per game of any team in the NFL. They were one of the worst rushing grade teams that we had in PFF system. Now, I know starting 2 rookie linebackers is a big reason for that, but so was the 2 guys in the middle. They did not have the run-stopping presence that they really needed. And so a defensive tackle who really knows how to stop the run, a Cade McDonald maybe from Ohio State, I think makes a ton of sense for them. Maybe safety. I think their safeties are good. I think their secondary played well as a whole down the stretch last year, but how good do you feel about that group going into 2026? And then interior offensive line. Again, offensive line played a little bit better as of late. Last month of the season, I think that they really started to come onto their own, but if you're Cincinnati, you've dealt with this too many times where you go, hey, I think we're okay at offensive line, and then it's just not what you need it to be going into the regular season. Don't let there be any doubt that you are putting out the best offensive line that you possibly can if you are the Cincinnati Bengals. So a couple things in the chat before we get out of here. You think Chambliss has a first-round grade? Interested to see where he lands. I don't think he's going to get first-round grades. I haven't done the full scouting report on him because we were still kind of wondering, hey, is he going to declare? Is he going to stay in school? It looks like the NCAA is going to make him go on to the pros. I don't think he's going to win his appeal to be able to go back to college for one more year. I don't think he's going to get a first-round grade just because overall lack of limitation or lack of physical gifts from him. Some limitations physically is probably just how I should have said that because that's how English works. But he is a really fun player. And I do think that even if he is a day 2 quarterback, you are getting somebody who can push for a starting job, can be an exciting player for you. I love how he plays in the big moments. And so I don't think he's going to get a first-round grade. But if these teams really need quarterbacks, maybe he gets talked about and potentially gets up into the first round. Somebody trades back up for him. I don't think so, but that's just my initial thoughts there. Mendoza is Matt Stafford, maybe? For sure not Kyler. Definitely not Kyler. Baker, in no university is Josh Allen. No, I think Josh Allen is basically the only Josh Allen. I think Stafford had more overall arm talent than Fernando Mendoza did. I think that Mendoza's overall arm talent's a little bit lower than it is for some of those, stud, no question about it, number 1 overall type of picks that we have seen in the past. So that's sort of my thought there with him is I still think he is a really good player, solid NFL starter, maybe a little bit more, but I don't think he's like a Joe Burrow, a Caleb Williams, a Matt Stafford, where you just feel to the moon that you got the number 1 pick in a draft where he was there. But I do still think he could win a lot of games for you at the NFL level. Last one, Ty Simpson's a bust. Hadn't even played yet. Also, a bust being bad or a bust for Canton, Ohio, because he's going to be a Hall of Famer? I'll go with the positive there. I'm going to spin it as a positive. No, I'm just kidding. I know that's not what he meant, but I think Simpson's got to go to a place where he's got a little bit of time. If you are starting him early on his NFL career, I just get worried because this is a talented player that I feel like a potentially really fun, successful NFL career could just get away from him if he lands in the wrong spot. So I just hope that he lands in the right spot. Appreciate everybody watching this live and after the fact. Always enjoy getting to do these. We had a lot of different topics that we hit here on this show. Appreciate everybody getting in on the chat. It was fun going back and forth with you guys about some of these player comps. If you guys want to see any of the PFF stats and so much more that we had on the screen to sort of talk about who these guys are as players and prospects and what they could be in the NFL, a PFF Plus subscription is how you do it. So if you don't have one, subscribe.pff.com. That's the best way to go get one. I'm Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus saying thank you guys so much for watching another episode of BR's Draft Board Show. We will see you guys next week. See you then.